Graham Potter sacked by Chelsea after 206 days, 31 games, 12 wins, 8 draws and 11 defeats. Paul wants Brendan, Todd wants Julian, while Thomas is sitting smirking at Hollywood, at FC Hollywood. Next week's episode of Chelsea Uncovered, Bruno consoles players, concern over a top half finish, and Jose Mourinho fuels rumours of a Chelsea return. Manchester United's pursuit of a Premier League title continues after their 2-0 defeat of Newcastle sitting only behind league leaders Arsenal. Arsenal say anything you can do, we can do. Yeah, that's it. After City demolish Liverpool and Arsenal match it, it's 8 o'clock and it only means one thing. It's time for the Super Six podcast. Welcome to the Super Six podcast. I'm your host, Kieran Stewart. I'm joined by Steve, Jack, Farrell, and Alex. How's everyone doing?
Yeah, really good.
Thank you.
Good.
Right.
I'd like to just like a special mention for Farrell and Alex just for turning up this week. I think they deserve a big round of applause actually. So well done.
Thank you, everyone. But first of all, we've got to talk about Graham Potter's sacking after what was it? After only 8 months in charge of Chelsea. Oh, how are you doing, Kevin?
Hi, Kevin. Evening, everybody. Sorry I'm a bit late. There was almost a blessing for you lot because my microphone wouldn't work.
No. No blessing. No blessing.
But I managed to sort it.
All right. Good. So after Graham Potter's only 206 days in charge and 31 games at Chelsea, their holistic style they've got bored of. He's gone. 2-0 defeat against Aston Villa was too much. We're going to go to Steve first of all. Steve, are you surprised by the sacking of Graham Potter?
No, mate. I mean, as soon as the game finished on, when was it? What day was it? They played? Was it Sunday?
Saturday.
I first thing I thought he was going to go in the morning. So, yeah, no, not surprised at all. But I'm not. I mean, look, I'm no big fan of Chelsea. Yeah, I mean. But what we got to look at is, you know, it's the similar thing to what, you know, with Tottenham and Daniel Levy, because look, the players can always do better. The actual manager can always do better. But there's only one man to blame for all this, and that's the Todd Bowley. He came in and absolutely made an absolute mess of that club. He came in with these ridiculous spendings. And they've destroyed them. He's obviously Potter's had no say in what goes on now. You can tell that he looks like a lost sheep sometimes out there on the touchline. You look at their players. I mean, Felix, Mudryk, Cucurella. I mean, absolute waste of money that was. You could go through, you know, a number of them are just an absolute farce of a summer window, and yeah, it's about time they looked at him, because managers get the sack, and Chelsea have done this for so long now, you know. But at the end of the day, the owners should be getting it right, and sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. But no, on this occasion, I think you've got to look at Bowley. But yeah, it was expected to me. I didn't think he'd last. I thought he'd go Sunday.
Jack, did you think it was the right appointment from the start?
Yeah, I don't think there were many people who thought Graham Potter coming in at Chelsea was a bad move at the time. I don't think many Chelsea fans did, or anyone from the outside at all. What they probably didn't expect is the plethora of players. Is this kind of bestow on Graham Potter, who's come from humble beginnings and sort of worked with a Brighton side, which nurtured talent and was able to bring them up. No big names, and now he's had to handle all these massive names. And I think it must have been a bit of an issue there with Steve's right about it is Todd's doing, but he still had to go at the same time because the results just weren't there. I think Potter's still a good manager, I really do, and I know he's had a terrible time with Chelsea, but there's still a manager in there that can do something quite well. He did so well with Brighton. There were talks about him becoming England manager at one point. I know Newcastle were interested in him or looking at him at least before we got Eddie Howe. It's just a bad tenure. But you just don't know what went on. Even Thomas Tuchel struggled at Chelsea. There was so much going on there, and the place, it seems like absolute carnage. And they put all these players in on 20-year contracts and stuff. And obviously, it's a recipe for disaster. There's no organic growth there. There's no semblance of identity. It's just been very, it's been like Todd Ball in the market, like Moneyball, but like Todd Ball, bringing every single sort of player for ridiculous. It seems like even Mudryk and stuff, they just seem to buy them because Arsenal were interested. I'm sure there is like recruitment behind it, but it just seemed like, oh yeah, Arsenal interested, we'll take him. In short, though, yeah, I think Potter was a good addition, but it just didn't work out for various reasons. I still think he's a good manager.
All right, Alex. Todd Bowley said he wanted to go with a holistic style, and we could have seen that in the type of manager he went in with Graham Potter. But did you feel that it was the right appointment to start, considering Chelsea's track record with their managers and the likes? Previous managers that have done well have been what you'd call the elite managers.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit surprised actually by his appointment, because I think in terms of Chelsea and their cup victories and their cup the way they play in cup games, I feel like I hadn't seen him really excel in the Champions League, so I didn't really feel like he was the man to take them forward. And a few of my friends who support Chelsea felt the same, and they were really upset by Thomas Tuchel being fired at the time. So, but having watched him at Brighton, I was convinced that he could do something and pull something off. So it was really surprising appointment, but I was hopeful to see possible at Chelsea and to see it kind of flourish. But unfortunately, it just didn't take off. And I think, as people have alluded to, the signings weren't that great. And I was quite surprised with Todd Bowley, because he was saying that, sacking Tuchel, he was going to move in a new direction. And that was potentially, from the way I interpreted it, was that he was going to look to keep managers, just like retain them for a period of time. And that hasn't been the case. And I guess, the run of performances that they've had have just not been up to standard. So yeah, he's had to make that call, unfortunately.
Farrell, Chelsea have spent 323 million in January, 600 million since July. The talk of Graham Potter not getting enough time, not getting the right players, are all these just excuses? Oh, sorry.
To be completely honest, and not just because I happen to be bang smack right next to Brighton, his old digs. It's like Jack said. I mean, he's a very good manager. You can look back through his history even before Brighton. I think I'm struggling to remember the last club he was with, but it was a proper Rambo
Stad or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. He's a very good coach. Whether there's an argument in terms of that he doesn't accept any responsibility, I mean, ultimately you always have to accept some of the responsibility, but you do have to look at sort of the external sort of circumstances there. I mean, the thing that sort of baffles me with this is ultimately, when you were sacking Tuchel, who was fundamentally an extremely popular coach, won the Champions League quite recently, you have to get this right. You have to bring in someone and say, we're absolutely certain this is going to be a success, because it just wasn't a popular move to begin with. I don't think Potter was the wrong call, but equally, I think, Steve's brought up sort of Levy example. I mean, obviously Chelsea had a lot more money to play with in both windows. But again, it doesn't matter. Just throwing money at the wall and seeing what sticks is never a good transfer approach. I mean, look at Arsenal. Compare the signings of Cucurella at Chelsea to the signing of Leandro Trossard at Arsenal. Two completely different outcomes there. Wildly different money as well. So it goes to show ultimately. I think just whoever the Chelsea bring in next, I don't think will necessarily I think they'll perhaps improve the situation. But until you get a more sort of cohesive approach sort of behind the scenes, I don't think the situation is going to massively improve, especially you've got all these players now on 7-8 year contracts, which, you know, how well is that going to work out with a new manager? How many of these players are going to appeal to a new manager? And then suddenly you've got a situation where you've got players potentially on 8 year contracts and the managers just want to play with them. So I think, you know, it's going to be a bit of a sharp learning curve for Todd Boehly, to say the least.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kevin, Todd Boehly's been here a short amount of time. He's gone through 2 managers. One of them managers won a Champions League. Does he look like he knows what he's doing? Has he got the right advisors around him?
He doesn't look as if he's got a clue what he's doing, to be honest with you. In terms of the right people around him, you know, I seem to recall that he's got rid of quite a few of the senior personnel at Chelsea as well. I mean, the biggest mistake, of course, was getting rid of Tuchel, wasn't it? You know, the reality is they got rid of Tuchel and then they looked around for a coach who was going to be better than him, because that's the reason you sack your coach, is you think you can get somebody better. There wasn't anybody. I like Graham Potter, by the way. I have some sympathy with him having gone into that scenario with a club that appears to be so badly run. Who's signing those players? I honestly don't know. I mean, you can't have that many players, really. It's ridiculous. I am a little bit surprised that they sacked him, even though they lost on Saturday, because he has got them through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And as Chelsea have proved before, I think under Di Matteo 10 years ago, you know, he took over, didn't he, midway through the season and took them on to win the Champions League. I would have thought that they might have left him in place until these Real Madrid games, but perhaps, as you sort of get the impression that that's what Boehly is like, I think Boehly maybe has seen that Nagelsmann is available. He thinks he's going to be better than Potter. He doesn't want, a bit like you were referring to the players before, probably he doesn't want somebody else to get Nagelsmann if he can get him. So I think there's a little bit of that in it, to be honest with you. And I hope it doesn't happen, of course, because City are involved. But there is a possibility that if Bayern Munich beat City in the quarterfinals, and if Chelsea beat Real Madrid in the quarterfinals, which is probably less unlikely, that Bayern Munich play Chelsea in the semi-finals, and it's Nagelsmann versus Tuchel. So football tends to throw up these things, doesn't it? It just strikes me as a very poorly run football club, and ultimately nobody's really surprised anymore when Chelsea sack managers. They have no patience. They have no... Listen, we talked about this last week, I think. The number of times, and the change now I accept for the right reasons, but the number of times that the Arsenal board were under pressure to sack Arteta, particularly at the start of last season when I think they lost the 5 games or something. Boards just need to have a little bit of strength. And if he was the right man in the first place, Potter, I mean, he can't suddenly be the wrong person this far, only this far down the line. I don't see things will ever change at Chelsea. They've got a new owner, but the whole ethos of the football club is no patience, hire and fire.
Steve, do you think Chelsea fans want it to change? Because I've seen many a times that Chelsea fans have said, this is the blueprint. We know this is not what everyone else does, but if the manager doesn't do it, we get in someone else, we win. Look at our trophies. Todd Boehly said he wanted to go a different way. Is it time they just go back to what they were used to, hiring and firing elite managers?
Yeah, I mean they've got to. I mean, they used to bring in some top managers, and I'm not having to go at Graham Potter at all, but for me, he's out of his depth. You know, I like the player. He's a good manager. But he's a Brighton manager, and that's, I think, what Iran is his mark. But I'm just not a fan of Chelsea anyway. You know, I'd take Spurs all day long over Chelsea. I really would. And that comes from an Arsenal fan. Don't like the way they do things. I don't like the way they treat players. I don't think the way they treat their fans. And going back to your question, whether I think it's whether they've got to change, they've got to change, because I think if they don't, I think they'll just go back to where they are now, just 10th and 11th. But I don't think Chelsea are a club who are going to be all of a sudden next season, be back to fighting Champions League or go into third or anything like that. People keep thinking that they're going to be spending more and more money in the transfer window. I can tell you now, that's not happening. I don't know anything for fact, but from what I'm hearing, that's not happening. They can't go and spend again. So they're in a situation now where, I think they deserve to be, because I think this has been a long time coming. They've ridiculous players, ridiculous wages, sacking managers, treating, these players, these managers have got lives. Do you know what I mean? Just in and out, treating them like cattle. And I hope they get what comes from them. They've got to go back to changing their ways. Todd Bowley hasn't got a clue. He's brought in players who haven't got a clue who they are. He bought Madrid because Arsenal fancied Madrid. I wouldn't even be surprised if Arsenal was doing it on purpose, and having a right good old laugh about it at this moment in time. Let's see if Todd comes in for Madrid. Because I'll be absolutely amazed looking at Madrid, the way he is now, that Arteta, knowing him the manager that he is, would have paid 88 million for him.
Very, very raw. 80 million.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think they pulled one on him. I think Arteta's pulled one on and the same with Joel Felix. He just moans, groans, throws his hands up in the air. Trying to get free kicks off. This is the Premier League, Mr. Felix. We're not playing. We're in Spain anymore. You have to toughen up a bit. He's wanting free kicks with ridiculous decisions. I hope they get what comes to them. I think they deserve it. And yeah, they've got to change. But even if they do, I don't think you're going to do Chelsea back to the top for a long while.
What's your thoughts on that, Jack? Do you see Chelsea coming back? Do you think there'll be a quick turnaround? They're getting a top manager and maybe potentially knock Newcastle out of that perch or someone else?
You mean like next season, maybe if they go in and they change their philosophy a bit and Todd's learnt his lesson, although saying that, they have technically spent 100 million for this upcoming summer already on Christopher Nkunku and Gusto, which is just hilarious in itself. They've already spent that much. So yeah, I mean, it just depends on who they get, and I think they just got to learn from their mistakes. He's come in and he's just sort of done everything gung-ho, bought the biggest names, just brought in all these players. I think there is a lot of players, Steve said, who will go. That's going to free up a lot of things, and maybe there'll be a bedding in period as well. Depends who they bring in, really. Poch has been linked, Nagelsmann as well. They're two top coaches. Maybe they'll have a bit more maturity. I mean, Pochettino's been at PSG before, so he knows how to deal with big names, certainly. So it's very possible. They're ambitious. They're a large club. I know Steve doesn't like them and that, but they are quite a big club in London and that. And but Todd's got to learn by his mistakes. And I think he must do now. And yeah, you got some of the good players there, like young players like Santos and that coming through. Gusto will come, and Cuckoo, as I mentioned, and that. So it should be all right. It just depends how they operate from here on in. It can't be this crazy. There's been a lot of change, like even in like the coaching staff, and like they've got two sporting directors. There's been a lot of change and stuff, and that always, that creates uncertainty. And now the manager's just gone, and the players found out for a text message, or they read it on the news or something like that. So, they've got to change up a little bit, but they have the financial might to do it, and there's some good players among there, despite them being brought. I know Mudryk is 100 million and stuff, but, there are other players there that can, I don't know about knock off Newcastle's perch, whatever, but certainly get up there maybe next season, compete for Champions League and just start again.
All right. Alex, do you see a quick turnaround for Chelsea? Do you think they'll be back next season, or they need to take their time? Or do they not even have that time?
I mean, they have the players there, so I think it's just a case of getting the right manager in. I think if they're really serious about challenging for next season, that's what it's going to hinge on for me. Gosh, it's unbelievable to think that they've actually spent 100 million already for next. Oh, it's just, I'm like, how does that even work?
They still haven't got a striker.
I can't get my head around it. Yeah, so that's another problem for them, that they've spent all this money and no striker. It's unbelievable. It's unimaginable. Yeah, it depends on who the manager is, and also it's the background staff. It's everything overall, because I think has the toxicity left is like how the players, like that's going to be a really like upheaval for them as well. So it's just getting them on side and getting them on board again and just like moving forwards. But I mean, for the sake of my team regaining top 4, I hope that they don't make top 4 next season or try and challenge at all. So yeah.
All right. Well, seeing as we're here on your team, 2-0 loss yesterday to Newcastle. Is there any worry that you might even be knocked out of them top 4 spots, Alex?
I mean, we've got Spurs behind us, so no. However, yeah, Brighton are looking really good this season, so there's that potential. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? Newcastle, they outplayed us. They played really well, and we just didn't turn up. I think you've seen our away form; it's shockingly terrible. I don't know what it is when we're not. It's like we're kind of like children who, we've gone away from our mom, and like, this is the first night, and we're crying to get her back because we can't handle it. It's like that's the way it seems. Poor Eric Ten Hag, I don't even know how he like feels every time he goes away from home, and it's like he has to deal with this team that sometimes fall apart. But yeah, I don't know. It was a difficult watch.
Jack, you must be happy of the win yesterday, up into 3rd spot with 2 games in hand on Tottenham, 50 points. Good feeling.
Yeah, great. It really is. We had a bit of a bump in the road a few weeks back, or month or so, when we had the Carabao Cup. I think because none of the players had been in a final before, they were kind of focused. It seemed that they were focused on that. And when that was over and done with, we started to kick on a bit. Isak sort of come into his own and stuff. And yeah, it was wonderful. We had Jacob Murphy playing in our starting 11 and we still won. So, that says a lot about where we are and stuff. And yeah, it's great. No, I've said in the show before, like we thought good season, top 8, decent cup run. Genuinely, Europa League was even laughed at. I remember people going like, we could get Europa League. And everyone's like, don't be ridiculous. Don't get Europa League at this stage, kind of thing. And we're 3rd, Arsenal, City ahead of us. Not sure we'll stay 3rd. I don't know. But I'm as confident as I've ever been for the whole season that we're getting top 4. Whether that changes, we don't know. There's still 10 games, 11 games to go. Yeah, it's a great feeling. And I haven't had this feeling since I was like 10 years old or something. Like, it's been a long time coming. And it's wonderful. Yeah, it is really wonderful. Love the manager. Love our group of players. And there's a really, really bright future. And obviously Champions League, get that. It's going to open up a lot of doors in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, definitely. Farrell, this must be a little worry. Newcastle, with the funds that they have, they're building a team. If Liverpool are not getting top 4 this season, so it's going to be a bit of a struggle. It's going to be. I'm not saying it in a way which is a dig. It's just the way I talk. A dagger through the heart. It must be a worry that with someone like Newcastle would be a very appealing to a lot of young and up and coming players, that Liverpool struggled to get that spot back.
I wouldn't say I'm so much worried. I mean, I'm definitely worried about this season. I've completely changed my prediction. I don't think we're getting top 4 either, to be completely honest. If there's any side that has a worse away record than United, it's going to be Liverpool at the moment. So I'm I'm worried about this season. I think long term, I'm not, because ultimately we've got arguably, in fact not even arguably, let's be honest, he is one of the top 2 managers in world football, Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp. Let's be completely honest here. So I'm not worried long term, provided the manager gets the backing that he needs. A lot been said of the midfield. You're looking at Bellingham, maybe a couple more sort of midfielders within the 40 to 50 million price range. This all adds up rather quickly suddenly for Liverpool without even considering other departments. So again, it all comes down to investment, as far as I'm concerned, even if, and it's looking incredibly likely, we don't get Champions League football and all the financial ramifications that brings. I don't think there's an excuse for the ownership. I think you've got to look at how well Klopp has worked within the budget, sustainability being, of course, the calling card of the FSG reign, for better or worse, largely for better, I would argue. So, yeah, I think it all comes down to investment. I think Newcastle clearly are going to be a force sort of going forward. They've got a very good manager who's getting the most out of the players at his disposal. And obviously, you compare to Arsenal, City, what Liverpool used to be, and you'd say, clearly they have comparatively far, better squads in terms of quality. So you think you're getting that much out of them already. Obviously you've got a few sort of absolute stars in that squad already, in terms of Bruno Guimaraes being the absolute case in point. But you think, my God, if they continue to keep spending well, it's not. I don't want to compare it to FSG, but in the sense of Newcastle don't have all this money to go and blow it out and just fire 100 million and see what sticks on the wall. They go, we'll spend carefully, we'll spend slowly, we'll bring in players gradually, and that's how you build a team that's capable of challenging for the top four. The complete opposite of the Chelsea model. So, I mean, hats off to them. You can't fault where they've come, because they're ultimately coached brilliantly, and I think the model they're going for is working for them. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Kevin, you've seen, you're in the same kind of situation that Newcastle are currently in now. You was there previously. From your experience, do you see that Newcastle are doing it in the right way, or will it remain to be seen maybe next season once they've got a few more options with a few more players wanting to join them because they're in the Champions League?
No, I think Newcastle have got it spot on, haven't they? I think they've bought wisely. They've not rushed into signing players. They've not paid over the odds, I don't think, for any of the players. There is a temptation when you've got a little bit more money, a little bit like we were talking before about Chelsea pinching players that Arsenal were supposedly going to sign. Newcastle haven't done that. I think they bought very wisely. If they do finish in the top four, that will be only better for them, of course, because the added riches that playing in the Premier League gives you, that's even more money than they probably thought. That I'm sure when they were budgeting ahead for the next 2, 3, 4 years, I doubt very much whether next year they would have been budgeting to have the money that the Champions League gives you. So that's going to be a bonus. I still think, something's got to happen a little bit more than that for them to attract the really big name players, I think. But sometimes what that needs to be is to sign one of them. Because once you've got one of them, then the rest start to follow. City did that with Yaya Toure. We signed Yaya Toure from Barcelona. And as soon as Yaya Toure came across, then we had David Silva, we had Sergio Aguero. But I'm impressed with Newcastle. I did say last week, actually, that I thought it was going to be a tough game for United at Newcastle, because I'd seen Newcastle's previous 2 games at home to Wolves, when, even though they only won 2-1, I think it was, the first half they could have been 4 ahead. And against Forest away, I thought they played very, very well. They do have a collectiveness and a passion about them that I do quite like as a neutral. So, I think they're on the right track. I would be surprised now, possibly, if they don't finish in the top 4. I think they've had that little lapse, and they've come back, and they've got the bit between the teeth. And their home crowd, I think, will help them. Certainly, I hope their home crowd helps them when they play Arsenal in a few weeks.
Steve, Man United, do you feel like they're going to get that top 4 spot from Tottenham, or is it they're in a bad patch of form at the wrong end of the season?
I think they will. Because, like Alex says, Tottenham are Tottenham, aren't they? And they'll just bottle it or fall apart or something. I mean, I don't know what the score. I think it's 0-0 at the minute. But I think they will. But with Manchester United, I just feel people need to, including the fans, that they need to sort of, take a deep breath, put it on hold, because they've got a manager who's came in, and I think that a lot of people are trying to fast track them too fast. I think Eric Ten Hag is, I don't know what Alex thinks or whatever, but from the way I see it, they're sort of getting at Ten Hag is one of the best managers in the Premier League. And at the moment, he's not. He's not. I think one day he will be, but Eric Ten Hag's not. And he's still got a lot to learn. He's came from the Eredivisie into the Premier League. That's a massive jump. I know he's done well in Champions Leagues, right? But that's the Champions League. This is a different kettle of fish. And I feel like sometimes fans, pundits are trying to just sort of fast track Man United into winning the title. We all know that they were saying that they've got a chance of the title. No, they wasn't. There was never ever in the title race. People should have got an idea of where Manchester United were when they didn't bother buying anybody in the January transfer window. Obviously someone knows that they're not here yet. And I think Manchester United fans, if they won a League Cup already, if they win another cup, if they make Champions League, everybody should be happy with that. But one thing I did say on one of the shows a little while ago, which I do worry with Manchester United, is, again, the Newcastle Man United game. I thought Newcastle were outstanding. Isaac, again, we brought up last week, is big fan of. Gamir is incredible. You could go through a lot of them, but again, there was players in that Manchester United side, to me, that just switched off. Just looked like they didn't want to know. It was like, oh. And again, I don't watch Manchester United week. Alex does, and I don't know what you other guys want, but it looks like they have got players at Rashford again. He was like wasn't there on the pitch. And I think, like with Man United fans or pundits use the same sort of sentence I'm going to say all the time. If we had Casemiro, well, I tell you, if Casemiro's the problem, then Man United have got a massive problem, because you can't keep relying on Casemiro every single game to win you a football match. And this is what I keep hearing. But Man United will be back. I ain't got no doubts about that. But give them some time, give them some breathing space, give Ten Hag some time to learn. Let him get some players in. They're going to be bought out soon. They'll have some money. I just breathe, because they're not there yet. They're not here yet. Finishing, if they get Champions League and win a cup, that's a good season for Manchester United right now. And we've all of us have sort of alluded to the fact that the way Newcastle are doing it, that's what Man United should be doing. Looking at the way Newcastle are doing it, slowly but surely. No fast track, because that'll make you foul. Right, we've seen what Chelsea tried to do. When you fast track, you foul. Tottenham have done it in the past. Fast track, you try to get it done.
Tottenham don't fast track anything. Tottenham don't fast track anything. I know what you mean. You're right. You are right. You are right. You are right.
So just slow
you are
down.
Right. But before we move on to the next one, after Alex, do you feel that fans, pundits alike need to exercise some patience with the team? It's going to take time.
Yeah, I do. But I think that the sensible fans among us, because I speak to loads when I go up to Old Trafford, and got a lot of mutual friends. And when we talk about our team, like we know that it's going to take time, and we're happy with the progress. I think a lot of us feel like, yeah, you can say it's a Casemiro team, but we know, because the players that we currently have, that we don't have like-for-like substitutions for some of the players. I don't think a lot of them, and a lot of them from before, are the ones who failed miserably. So I think that sort of bozo gene, as it were, still persists. So I don't think a lot of us are thinking, oh, we're going to win the league, we're going to win all this stuff. But there are fans among us who get excited, and that's fine. I mean, you're seeing them winning again, you're seeing them playing in some type of structure. So you're going to assume that potentially it could be our year. But the sensible ones among us remain very cautious and very kind of level-headed, because it's football. We know there's ups and downs, and we know it's going to take time. We know that he's going to need 2 more summers to get the signings that he needs, to get rid of like a lot of the players that were there when Fergie was even there. So it's a process, but I think that you can't help the fan base, and obviously the press. They're going to harken back to the days when we had Sir Alex Ferguson and we were winning back to back trophies. So I think it's the pressure's always going to be on us. It's like what Erik ten Hag said when he said that the Manchester United shirt it's a heavy shirt to bear, because that there's such a high expectation for the club and for the players. So I've seen a lot of them capitulate, especially away from home, like I said before. So it's very tough, but I'm chill. I'm just hopeful. I'm just glad that we've got a manager that can actually, string a good game, a decent game here and there together, and we've won a trophy this season. So, like you're saying, for Newcastle, I'm happy with the way the season's going. If we end up with top 4, it's a good season for us, I think.
All right, now on to the big one: Manchester City 4, Liverpool 0. I was like, what? Leave me alone. This is bullying. I'll start with Kevin. I saw a clip the other day which started off with someone saying it's about time we admitted that Jack Grealish was a flop. I think he showed that he wasn't a flop the other day, didn't he?
Listen, I think he's come into his own probably the last 10, 12, 14 games. I think there's a few reasons for that. First of all, Pep's been picking him every game. And I think he's that sort of player who needs to continue to play. That gives him confidence. I don't think there's any doubt he's got the ability, and he's scoring goals now. He's assisting, and he's looking the player that we thought that we were signing a year ago. But I think on Saturday, it's difficult for me to judge how poor Liverpool were, because City were just magnificent, to be honest with you. Right from the very start of the game, they were absolutely bang on it. And even when we went 1-0 down, I don't think there was anybody in the stadium who was too stressed by that, because we just had continual possession of the ball. I would have to say that I look at some of the Liverpool defenders, Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, who have been right at the peak of their game. All 3 of those were dreadful on Saturday. I mean, they really were. As good as City were, I don't think any of them really did themselves any favours. I have a little bit of sympathy for Trent Alexander-Arnold, in that I don't think he's a right-back. I've never really thought he's a right-back. I think he'd be a pretty good midfield player, by the way, in the right team, and probably with the right coach. But again, it's a little bit, if everybody else can see it, and Trent Alexander-Arnold is no longer even in the England squad, let alone in the England team. Somebody at Liverpool surely must see that is a square peg in a round hole. And it's amazing for me to have seen. I think it was James last week spoke about, he thought City would win 3-0. I wasn't convinced, because I thought City would win, but I think I said it would be a very tight game. Liverpool had gone right off, they've fallen right off. I was amazed to see almost how average they looked, to be honest with you. And that's probably being polite to them. That's probably being polite to them to say that they were average.
Yeah.
And 4-1 after, in the mid-60s minute, I'm thinking this could go on and be 5 or 6. It could almost be the reverse sort of what happened to United at Anfield, because it was that easy. But City took, the foot off, the pressure off. Pep made a few changes because it was comfortable. It was easy to do that because there was no way that Liverpool were coming back into that game. They have got a lot to do, and actually, going back to Steve's point about rebuilding, I don't think Manchester United, and Alex might disagree with me here, I don't think Manchester United fans have the patience for United to rebuild in the same way that Newcastle are doing. And that comes, of course, on the back of magnificent success. I think Liverpool fans actually, if they were to rebuild Liverpool in the same way that Newcastle are now being built under Eddie Howe, I think Liverpool fans would be a little bit more understanding and patient of that, because it is almost, you know, a full rebuild that team needs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I look through them, and I've just referred to the three top class defenders that the US had, and that's just the defence. I'm not sure from within that team, and that includes Gakpo, by the way, and maybe even Salah. And this might sound harsh. There's not a single player in Liverpool starting 11 that would get into City or Arsenal's team. Not a single one. And that's a terrible indictment from where they were, because City and Liverpool had been at it toe to toe for 5-6 seasons, and I honestly don't see a single player from Liverpool's first team getting in either our team or Arsenal's.
All right, Farrell. Liverpool have got a lot to do. It starts by having a long look at themselves after the 4-1 victory. To say they went out with a whimper is an understatement. They lied on their backs with their paws up, even at 1-0 up. It was just pure counter-attacking football. Nothing on the front foot, which is massively surprising from Liverpool. Even away to Man City, they were just fearless. Liverpool used to be high press, putting the pressure on the defenders, and then hitting them on the counter high up the top of the pitch, rather than waiting for Manchester City to come and attack them all the way down in their own halves and then trying to counter-attack. It just didn't work from the start.
I'll address the pressing issue first. I think the problem is, ultimately, I think Liverpool don't really, I want to say, the right mindset, energy levels, whatever you want to pick. We don't have the key ingredients to play that style of football currently this season. You know, I think if we tried anything bar counter-attacking football against City at the Etihad, it would have been, you know, as Kev mentioned, probably more along the lines of a 7-0 sort of scoreline. I think this is the problem. Liverpool have had to play more conservatively, because the minute the problem we have at the minute is that our forward line isn't pressing how it used to, which then has an impact, of course, on the midfield. The midfield is equally appalling. It leaves plenty of space in behind. So you've just got this issue where the departments are chucking their problems onto the other departments, and the departments are chucking their problems. And it's just nuts across the pitch, which is absolutely, you know, I couldn't possibly in my wildest dreams have perceived a drop-off of this scale. After following a season in which we were 2 games from winning a quadruple, it just doesn't, it absolutely just beggars belief. It really, really does. I mean, it's telling, certainly, that Klopp sort of came after it and said, you know, 2 things. One, even if City had Rodri sort of sent off, don't think that Liverpool would have beaten City against 10 men. I think that's a fair assessment. Equally, he picked out 4 players that, you know, did an all right job. And Alisson Becker, who I think certainly would have been our player of the season. He's been by far our most consistent player. Cody Gakpo, Jordan Henderson, Fabinho. I think it's probably a bit generous to give Henderson and Fabinho praise. I thought the midfield was horrific from what I've seen. There just isn't really any excuses. I think we're at the point where I think, barring any sort of miracles, and obviously Klopp's a world-class manager, so you never know, he might find some workable solution that at least makes the sort of run in a little bit interesting. But I'd be very surprised if Liverpool come from here and get top 4. It's just the body language is off. There's just no intensity. There's no drive. You know, as I mentioned, the forwards don't press how they used to. I think you can kind of understand that. We started with the front 3 of Salah, Gakpo, and Jota, and I'd argue our best front 3 at the moment is actually Gakpo, Salah, and Nunez. There's a lot to sort out, and the problem is that until we start investing in the summer and solving these issues, it isn't gonna help. And I'm not saying obviously just signing midfield is going to instantly make Liverpool a title challenger again. I don't think it will, but it will absolutely, at the minimum, make us far more competitive. You know, I think Liverpool this season will be kind of need to just do. don't want to say damage limitation. It's just a bit, rubbish from a Liverpool perspective and what you think Liverpool should be doing under this manager, certainly. But I think we're at a point where we kind of need to acknowledge Champions League football is realistically unlikely. So we know there's going to be an impact financially in the summer without the financial benefits that it brings. So the question then is, well, how much are we prepared to invest? Are we still going to be that club that says, as you go, no, you can invest all that you bring into the club and no more, because you think, well, realistically, is that going to be enough to get Liverpool back to where it should be? Is that even going to cover 130 million, maybe even more, depending on what Dortmund are prepared to sanction? I know there's loads of talk in terms of the player will be particularly important deciding where he wants to go, but Liverpool can't get away with just signing one brilliant midfielder, even one as brilliant as Bellingham. It's just not going to work. So I think FSG need to acknowledge that this is a special sort of time we find ourselves in, an exception to go. Put your hand where your mouth is. Invest in the side. It's not going to be the case where you're going to have to chuck 200 million at the squad every single season for the next 3 seasons, but you are going to have to invest heavily this summer to get us back to where we need to be. So only time will tell.
All right, great answer. Jack, you're the transfer man. What do Liverpool need to do? What are the chances of, if they don't get Champions League, that they will be able to get those sorts of players that will at least take them back into the Champions League spots, and then they can start that rebuild again?
I don't know too much about, how much more money extra the Champions League is. I do sympathise with Liverpool fans, and two games off a quadruple last season. And you think as well, not just that, it's like, how many games did they play? They played the maximum amount of games possible last season. 3 cup finals to the very end. You had a Premier League race, which they kept up with City to the last. And you've got this aging side. They rested on their laurels of FSG. And now the players are, the word is, everyone uses legless. And because they're absolutely knackered. James Milner playing against Real Madrid in the Champions League. It's just gone a bit kaput because they just didn't invest in the right areas. I do wonder, however, because Liverpool don't need to do a Chelsea, don't need to spend ridiculous sums of money, because you think of some back there, some of the best players. Okay, Alisson, I think it was the record keeper at the time and Van Dijk was a lot of money, but I think that's because Southampton were playing hardball. But you look at like Salah, Mane, players like that were very shrewd signings, both of which came under 35 million, I think. If they can just do that again and just be a bit clever, and then they've got Klopp behind them, and I agree, I think he is top 2 managers in the world, they will be able to push on. They do need to compete by bringing in, I think Bellingham's going to be huge for them, because unfortunately it's so out there now that if they don't do it, it almost catastrophises the following campaign already. If they get him in and they spend like another 100 and they just fill in the dots, a shrewd signing here for 20 million, just bed in and do it organically again. And I think Kevin was right about Liverpool fans. They are understanding, they are patient, but they're obviously frustrated because of how the season's gone, because it's such a massive dip. And then you see other clubs spending and stuff. And however, I do think, the Man United game where I don't know what happened, that 7-0 win, and you had that trident trio of Salah, Gakpo, Nunes. They look absolutely phenomenal. And I don't know if that's more testament to how poor Man United were on that day or how good Liverpool were, but there's still life in there, I think, with Liverpool. There's still something about them. They just need to relax, take it easy. They're not going to get Champions League. And I think, damage limitation is not a nice word when you're talking about sport as well. But I think that's perhaps what they need to do, is just keep the boat steady, make sure it doesn't turn into like a crisis. Look at Chelsea now, it's a crisis. Have all that hanging over their heads. They just need to be clever in the window. Okay, that includes Bellingham, and they have to be ambitious, but they also have to make those signings that they used to. They didn't compete with City just by spending loads of money. They were competitive with their money, but they also were clever about it. And if Liverpool can do that, you look at Brighton and stuff, like all the players like McAllister and all that kind of thing have been linked with moves away. Even Evan Ferguson's like 100 million now. Where did he come from? Like, you can just get a few of them and then things start to tick over again. It's just, I don't know what's happening with the Liverpool recruitment and stuff like that. They just need to be clever and yeah, let's see. I hope they do well. I do generally mean that. I do hope Liverpool do well, but not at the expense of Newcastle. But other than that,
Alex, I'm sure these are two teams that you don't really want to be talking about, but I'm definitely going to ask you still. Do you feel that Liverpool are in danger of potentially falling off with especially with the likes of Newcastle pushing into that Champions League spot, Arsenal looking like if they win the league, they solidify that position in the top four again, hopefully next season. Do you think Liverpool are in danger?
I mean, there's definitely going to be a fight for top four every season now. We've got Newcastle entering the arena, and I think we've watched Brighton this season as well be really surprising and grow game by game for me as well. So I think there's always that potential to have teams like that push you out. I think, yeah, the issues with them not being able to afford certain players is a bit of a tricky one for them. But I think they've got such a incredible manager that I feel like he is going to be able to potentially increase them winning and their potential to remain in the top four. But it is going to be getting more competitive. Like every season, it's more and more competitive. So, and the stakes are pretty high. I mean, we all want to game for that Champions League spot. So it's going to be a tough season for them. But I mean, as much as like Liverpool are United's biggest rivals, I always want them to see them in top four. I want to see them in Champions League football because I think, that's where the rivalry can maintain and keep its validity. So yeah, I'd like to.
How nice of you to want Liverpool in the Champions League.
That's where we differ.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kevin, what is it? 12 days, 5 games. Is that going to be? Can Manchester City handle it?
Yeah, I think we can. I think they've been there before. Pep was very clever, wasn't he? The other day, he did an interview. He said sarcastically, I think he said he'd rather be in Arsenal's position than having the experience that City have got of winning the title 4 times out of the last 5. And that does count. But listen, I've said it the last few weeks. Fair play to Arsenal. They keep, responding. They keep winning. I don't think it's what's going to happen between now and the next 6 games. It's going to be those last 6 games that run in to the final game of the season that are going to count. As poor as Liverpool were against us, their home record has been good this season. It's on the back of the home record that they're probably not in a much worse position than they're in. Arsenal have to go to Anfield. We've already said that, Arsenal have to go to Newcastle. Both City and Arsenal have to play Chelsea. We're both at home. Now that's the same sort of game, but in Arsenal's position, it's a London derby, so there's more on that. So there are going to be a few. Steve and I were chatting about it a couple of days ago. In an odd way, I can't see either of them losing, but one of them is either going to have to lose or draw when we play each other, because Arsenal have to go to the Etihad. And it will just be one result, either City dropping points or one result, excluding the game where we play, Arsenal dropping points, that's going to change it. It just depends when that happens, I think. In terms of Champions League money, by the way, when City were beat by Chelsea 2 seasons ago in the Champions League final, they earned £52 million out of the Champions League that season. So there's a lot of money in the Champions League. And another point about United, by the way, there is an element of United might not need to finish in the top 4 because they've got a very, very good chance of winning the Europa League, and the winners of the Europa League qualify for the Champions League. So maybe that's, I don't know. We like to think it's not, as fans, we don't like to think our teams are distracted. Maybe there is an element of United having won one cup. The players are distracted about the Europa Cup. They can probably see that's a great opportunity for them. And of course, they're still in the FA Cup semi-final. So maybe if there was a slight belief with the United players, and there was some talk, wasn't there, about this WhatsApp group that they had. Maybe if there was some belief that within the United players that they could challenge for the league a few weeks ago, and that's disappeared, maybe the players are concentrating on the Europa League and the FA Cup. Because a bit like Liverpool, United's away record really is pretty dreadful, isn't it? Let's be honest. You know, they conceded 4 at Brentford, 6 at City, 7 at Liverpool. I think when they go behind in a game, it's almost as if they struggle how to deal with that away from home. Even at Leeds, where I think United ended up winning 2-0, Leeds played really well that day. And had Leeds gone in front, you might have imagined the United would have struggled there. So I do think United have a lot to do to get to get up to challenging Arsenal and City next season. But the one thing that will certainly happen with United is the money will there to be invested. You know, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Steve, about Ten Hag not having any money to spend in January, but he spent 200 million in the summer. You know, so it's not as if they've not been spending money. But the point I'm making there is they will have more money to spend in the summer, without any shadow of a doubt. Whether it's the new owners or it's the current owners, they will reinvest, and that's probably bad news for Liverpool, because I just don't see the Liverpool owners investing the amount of money that's needed. I think in 3 of the seasons that we won the Premier League, we beat Liverpool by, on 2 seasons, 1 point only. 2 seasons, 1 point, and 1 season, 2 points, I think. Interestingly, Liverpool haven't won at the Etihad since 2015 in the Premier League. Now, all Liverpool had to do in all of those seasons was to win it. If they'd have won at the Etihad in all 3 of those seasons, they'd have won the Premier League 3 times. And that can probably only be down to a lack of investment in the right players, and that extra special player who's on the bench, or that extra player who comes in to replace somebody who's, you know, gone a little bit past the sell-by date. And I think that's what Liverpool just haven't managed to do really well. They've allowed themselves to get into a situation now where there's too many players that need to be replaced. And I agree that Klopp is a great coach, but there's almost an element of... is there a great deal of difference between where Chelsea and Liverpool are this season? Is there a great deal of difference? Chelsea, in fact, are better because they're in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Yet Potter's been sacked.
It's controversial.
Klopp is a great coach, so I think he could go on somewhere and continue to be a great coach. But, you know, after 7 years, he's the longest-serving manager in the Premier League. Has he quite got the fight for it at Liverpool anymore? It's one of those strange relationships, I think, where there's no way that Klopp would leave Liverpool, but there's no way that the board would sack Klopp. But in reality, both of them probably want a parting of the ways.
Be interesting. Quickly, I will go to you, Farrell, on this one. I will go to you quickly before we go to Steve on the Arsenal game. Do you think that Klopp's got the fire in his belly to rejuvenate this team, and do you think that FSG will back him in that?
I mean, in terms of Klopp having fire, I can tell you right for now, he absolutely has the fire in his belly. I have no doubt about that. Not a single doubt in any fibre of my being that Klopp has the fire in his belly to keep going. It's been a crap season. Been an absolute, dog's ear of a season. But Klopp will keep going. Again, I'm a broken record, but it comes down to the investment. As to how many of these players have sort of reached the peak of the mountain and don't have it in them to keep going and face the next one, I'm not convinced by the argument that Van Dijk has, lost his powers and we may as well get rid of him and all this rubbish. Whether there's an argument for putting Alexander-Arnold in midfield, potentially, yes. The critical thing for me is that Alexander-Arnold thrives when he has space to run into and play his pass. You play him too high up the pitch, he'll be crap. he thrives on the space. So I don't agree with this argument of putting him in attacking midfield role. I think it's absolutely nonsense, and clearly anyone who's made that argument hasn't watched him play and doesn't have a clue how he thrives. Same thing again. Konate, 23 years old, I believe. Has he turned 24? I think he's 23. Extremely bright future in the game. Andy Robertson, again, I'd argue it was horrendous at the Etihad, but I'd be massively surprised if anyone in Liverpool is saying we need to seriously look at chalking him off and bringing in the next one. I'd absolutely say the opposite, of course, again with players like Jordan Henderson and Fabinho. I think they do need to be looking at sort of bringing them. They can't be key players again for Liverpool next season. You do need to massively revamp the midfield. Forward line, I'm reasonably happy with. I think Klopp needs to work that out tactically. But I mean, come on, we're not the same level as Chelsea. Let's be objective here. We're not the same level of Chelsea. Our recruitment is miles ahead. Like, assuming that Liverpool do get the backing that they need this summer, I'm pretty confident that we'll do okay. We've got the right people in behind the scenes. We make the right decisions. Generally, I'm trying to think of one signing we've made under the Klopp regime that hasn't worked out quite well. Marco Grujic, maybe. I'm not.
Naby Keita. Sorry, Farrell. I'm not doing this on purpose.
No, I'll give you Naby Keita. But I will say in Naby Keita's defence that he's massively injury prone. He's massively injury. We've seen Naby Keita when he's at his absolute best. He's been phenomenal. Now, if I went back in time, would I sign him again? Absolutely not. He's never been around, and fundamentally, we've got too many players, like that have just been, injured. But look at Thiago Qatar again. You've got so many players like that where you kind of think, oh, they're brilliant, and when they're fit, and you shouldn't be having discussions when they're fit. Look at Gini Wijnaldum. There was this insane statistic, I think, from his Premier League availability. He missed less than 4% of Liverpool's Premier League games. Less than 4%. We could only dream of having a midfielder that was that available all the time. And again, we signed him for 25 million. For 25 million from Newcastle.
But this is the problem. In that time where you had these players, you had Ronaldo, you had Mane, you had all these players you're bringing in, even players like Minamino, you was bringing in players, squad players. You kind of rested on your laurels. You had your team, and there wasn't any sort of look to the future to rotate. It seems like you did that with the forward players, bringing in Jota. It looked like Curtis, what's his name, was looking like he was going to be something. He's not quite lived up to that. Harvey Elliott, again, similar type as well. Is he really what Liverpool need? I'd say it probably needs to be more of a second string player rather than first team, and that to me says where you are at the moment, that Harvey Elliott is one of your first team starters week in, week out, when he should be someone he's looking up to get their spaces. That's where Arsenal were a few seasons ago. Where do they go now? And when I say about the investment and the fire in the belly, okay, Klopp has the fire in the belly, but when will that fire burn out? Because FSG aren't backing him. Year after year, when you get fourth place, fifth place, fourth place, fifth place, people are getting frustrated looking at you when really in the background you're not getting the investment, you're not getting the big player, and then the little players in the following season. It's the one big player, no signings, or one signing, and that's the problem.
I think Klopp's already alluded to it to a certain degree that he himself has to take some personal responsibility for this, because I think, and again, we keep going back to it, but you do have to look at it in the context of Liverpool. We're 2 games away, and you played a 63-game season, 2 games away from permanently etching our names into the history books. Did at that point we need to strengthen? Absolutely, I completely agree. I think we did. For God's sake, we only signed 1 senior midfielder in the last 4.5 years. That was Thiago Alcantara. Again, injury-prone midfielder. We should have strengthened. We didn't strengthen. Equally, how many of us sitting here today could have predicted after that season that Liverpool would go on to be, I think it was 6th or 7th in the table? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know. But my analogy, it's like, let's say Carl Lewis, and his final year in his Olympics wins gold medal. The following year, he's got nothing left because you've absolutely taken everything out of him year after year after year after year, and they've given their last bit, and that was all they had to give. And now they've got nothing left. I completely understand your viewpoint is in it looks like how can they fall off so much? But if we look at previous seasons before, they were there and thereabouts as well. They were very close as well. And that's when they should have invested, not at the end of it when you flogged the dead horse so long that he's got nothing left and he's just exhausted.
The problem is alternatives, though, isn't it? Because we can't say Liverpool had absolutely zero intention of signing someone the last summer window. There was Aurélien Tchouaméni, who was Klopp wanted him. He genuinely wanted him. The money was put aside. Everton clearly went, look, if you want a top midfielder, go out and buy a top midfielder. You will have £80 million to buy a top midfielder. We went for Tchouaméni. He decided to go Madrid. Fair enough. Okay, no problem. The problem is we didn't then go, well, let's get an alternative. We went, these lads have taken us to mountain. We were just 2 games away from a quadruple. We can last a season. We'll get Bellingham next summer. You should have got a top midfielder. And I'm a massive fan of our transfer policy generally. I like the fact that Klopp does go, I have these top targets in mind. If I don't get them, I don't want someone who's like average or above average. I want my man. This approach worked out for me across my tenure at Liverpool. I respect that. But I refuse to believe the case that it was Tchouaméni, Bellingham, or no one. He's telling me there was no one underneath that pool of players that would have at least been very good, if not, generational. Somewhat like, a 20 million player. I appreciate the market is a bit distorted right now. 20 million isn't what it was anymore. You're probably looking to spend more 30, 40. That's fine. I appreciate that. But I think Klopp has to take some responsibility, not all responsibility, but he does have to take some responsibility because clearly on his part, he thought the likes of Henderson, the likes of Fabinho, he didn't foresee. I think if Klopp had an idea that they would dip to this degree, I don't think he would have gone through to the season without bringing on some kind of play, somewhat, at least a couple of signings in that sort of 30 to 40 million range. I don't think he would. I think he's acknowledged that mistake, but it's come too late. We've ended up signing a forward in January who, I rated him extremely highly, but we needed midfielders. And the problem is now we're here. We're not going to get top 4. We don't know what the impact is going to be financially. We don't know how much, to what extent Fenway are going to mitigate that. But I think Klopp has to take some responsibility for it.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see where Liverpool go from here. All right, Steve, you've been waiting very patiently up there. Arsenal 4, Leeds 1. Gabriel Jesus back with a brace, looking sharp. What's your feeling?
I'm great here. I don't know what sort. I've just listened to Farrell there, and I just, I feel quite sorry for him at Liverpool in this mess at the minute. But
come on, what's your pity? Especially not from an Arsenal fan.
Yeah. But on the other side of the coin, I mean, we were absolutely outstanding again. We've been outstanding all season. Jesus comes in, first game back from being from injury since November/December. Full game, 2 goals. I mean, just like he ain't been away, and now we've got him, through to our running. Again, we didn't have Bukayo Saka. We gave him a rest. Apparently our terrible squad and rubbish squad can't cope. Decides to rest one of the best players in world football at the moment. So, it's another thing that people should be having a look at. But they was outstanding. Leeds played quite well from the beginning. Ramsdale had to make a fantastic save.
Is there a worry there? Arsenal conceding the chance so early in the game again. They did it against Bournemouth. They did it against Leeds. Ramsdale out to save them this time. They're coming up against Liverpool next week. Surely Klopp's going to be looking at that, and definitely against Man City, you need to worry about that.
Yeah, obviously it's a worry. You don't want to start games like that. But when you can go and whack 4, afterwards, you can accept it. But you're right. You don't want to start games like that. And it was a similar, type of move to the one with the Bournemouth. The ball went over the top. Zinchenko went up forward. and got a little bit caught. And it was like a mirror of what happened with Bournemouth. But after that, I mean, there was only one winner, and again, it was a matter of how many goals. And I just want to single out one man. I mean, Granit Xhaka. I mean, absolutely 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 performance. Jesus got the plaudits, but Granit Xhaka, incredible this season. I mean, if anybody can name me a better player in his position now, I'd like him to tell me who he is, because for me there isn't one. I think he's the best there is. And you look at a team of the season, I think he should be in it. But there was fantastic performances all round. Arsenal had to, come back from or retaliate from watching Man City early in the day win 4-1. I keep telling you, they don't care. There's no fear in these players. I disagree with Kevin a little bit when he says about Man United and Man City. Sorry, have done it before. I don't think that means absolutely nothing. I think when you're the best team in the league, right, and you've got these players who have this type of mentality, I really don't think what you've done before means a single thing. I really don't. We're the best side in the league, and that's all that matters. And I hear what people were saying about Liverpool, going to Liverpool and Newcastle, and the worries that we're going to have. Newcastle fantastic at the moment. Liverpool on their day can beat anyone. But what I say to them, come and beat the best team in the country, because I think they'd be more worried about us than what they're worried about them. And I think this psyche has got to be put out there, and fed into Arsenal fans, because I think people are just trying to upset. I think people are trying to upset us. So, yeah.
Well, I think you'll find we did beat the supposedly best team in the country in their own backyard. But apart from that,
one game, mate.
I'll
tell you what. Sorry, mate. I'll tell you what. I think Man City were fantastic.
Don't throw a butt in, Steve. It won't. It doesn't become
there's definitely a butt coming. 100% butts coming.
But I tell you what, I hope Haaland is playing against us.
What?
No, I'm telling you, Man City are a better team. Man City the weekend were outstanding. That was Man City when they had the Agueros in, when they had that type of football, that ping pong bish bash, when they could have got 8. Right?
So,
I haven't seen that under Haaland.
When we played you at the Emirates, was Haaland playing that night?
It's one game, Kev. One game. One game. I'm telling you, Man City are better in that type of. I'm not saying that Ireland's better than but for the system that they play.
He's only got 42 goals this season. I
don't care. I really don't care.
Absolutely everything you're saying.
Harry Kane's got coming up to 30, but Tottenham are tosh. It don't mean anything. So, but all I'm saying, I'm bigging up City. I'm bigging them up.
No, I know what you're saying. Listen, I thought on Saturday they were more fluent. They played a different style of game. They almost went back to having a false 9. It wasn't quite the same, but
it was exciting, wasn't it?
Alvarez doesn't play as a true centre forward when he plays in that team. But I think most City fans were probably a little bit nervous before the game on Saturday that Haaland wasn't playing, and no Foden as well. But the reality was, Pep just checked. I think this is all about the coach. This is my point, I think. Pep just changed it. Pep was very clever. I mean, Grealish and Mahrez stayed absolutely wide. They didn't do anything apart from staying wide. And the reason they did that is because they knew that Klopp was going to invert the fullbacks, that Robertson and Trent Arnold were going to, make those runs that you talked about before. And all that does is it leaves plenty of space behind them. But Pep was very clever about it. John Stones was like Beckenbauer, the role that he played. Seriously, he was playing in midfield for 60 minutes of the game. So, listen, I think, and I'm not saying it in a pet way, by the way. I think it's Arsenal's to lose because they are playing very, very well. I do look at the fixtures, and I wonder. I suppose it's a little bit in hope. I hope that Arsenal go to Anfield and Liverpool give them a game. I hope that Arsenal go to Newcastle and Newcastle give them a game. But it's going to be tough for Liverpool and for Newcastle because Arsenal are a very, very, very good football team. And if we end up not winning the Premier League, that's because the best team in Arsenal have won it. Ultimately, the 38th game tells you who the best team in the Premier League is. If that's Arsenal, that's fine. I've no problems with it because I've enjoyed watching them. Apart from the fact that, you know, they're putting City in second place in the Premier League. When I watch Arsenal play, I enjoy it. So fair play to you.
Right, right. Ended very nicely there. A bit too nicely for my liking. What I will say on the Alaves and Haaland thing is it'd be interesting to see if he was to play a run of games and whether he can keep that up and whether, because it's all well and good at a player, and especially a striker or a forward player coming in for 1 or 2 games, but it's the consistency that is the important thing. And it's not that I don't think Steve's wrong, because I think that Man City did play in the reverted to type, but I just go back to what I said last week, and this is Haaland's first season. It's the first season under Pep, and if he breaks the amount of records that he's going to be breaking this season in his first learning season, it'd be devastating what he does next season and going forward. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that goes.
They're a great side either way, aren't they, Kieran? Whatever way you are. I would just that's scared. I watched Man City, and that scared me watching them the weekend.
Yeah. Any Man City side is scary.
Imagine what that team's going to be like next season with Bellingham in it.
Yes, Farrell's like, I'm not coming on here again. All right, that's all we have time for. We've gone 16 minutes over, but time flies. Thank you everyone who's joined us tonight. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Farrell, Kevin, Steve, and Jack. All right, make sure you catch us next week at 8 o'clock. Every Monday for the Super 6 podcast. Peace out, people. Stay safe and wash your hands.